Imagine stepping off the curb on a really busy Tuesday morning.
Oh, right into the rush hour chaos.
Exactly. You are right downtown. Your foot is hovering like an inch above the asphalt. A city bus is just barreling toward you at 40 miles an hour.
Terrifying already, honestly.
Right. And a flock of pigeons is taking off from a nearby statue. And then in a fraction of a millisecond,
Everything changed.
the air just turns to solid concrete. The bus doesn't screech to a halt. Its tires freeze mid-rotation.
It's just locked in place.
Yeah, the pigeons hang suspended in midair. Your foot never hits the ground. And that deafening, chaotic roar of the city, it doesn't just quiet down. It cuts to absolute, impossible zero.
It's just, well, it is the ultimate terrifying subversion of everything we understand about the physical universe.
It really is.
Because, we always picture the end of the world as highly kinetic. Explosions, collapsing infrastructure, people running, fire everywhere.
Yeah, like an action movie. Big chaotic destruction.
Right. We understand destruction as a chaotic force that breaks down order. But the scenario you just described presents a landscape of terror defined by the exact opposite.
Inescapable synchronization.
Exactly.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are incredibly excited to have you sitting here with us as we unpack a narrative that is, frankly, going to fundamentally change the way you look at a crowded street.
Oh, for sure. You won't look at a commute the same way.
Never again.
Yeah.
Today's sole source material is this brilliantly unsettling YouTube video transcript from a channel called The Midnight Curator. The piece is titled, "The Entire City Stopped at the Same Time."
That's such a great cut.
It sets it up perfectly. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore what happens when the messy, chaotic noise of human existence is violently reformatted into a centralized, flawless hive mind.
I mean, it is a remarkable piece of modern sci-fi horror, mainly because it bypasses the traditional monsters,
Right, no zombies or aliens.
Yeah, and it zeroes in on a much deeper existential dread. It asks us to confront the extreme fragility of our physical autonomy, our biology, and really the very laws of physics that govern our reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's dive straight into the physical mechanics of this, because the author spends a significant amount of time painting the before picture.
They really ground it in reality first.
Yeah, they anchor you in the totally mundane.
Yeah.
You are standing on a street corner in a dense urban center. There are horns blaring. There are thousands of overlapping conversations, people arguing, laughing, sneezing.
It's just the typical messy human experience.
Exactly. You have the low, steady hum of subway grates, the screech of bus brakes, and that constant, erratic motion of commuters just weaving past each other.
What's fascinating here is that the text specifically defines this baseline as a system characterized by constant chaotic noise and movement.
Which we usually hate, right? Like, it's so annoying.
We completely view that chaos as an annoyance. But structurally, from a biological and sociological standpoint, that chaotic friction is the ultimate symphony of human independence.
Oh, I like that. A symphony of independence.
Yeah, because it represents millions of independent wills, executing millions of separate physical trajectories, all intersecting in one shared space. Chaos is organic.
Messy, but alive. And then the text uses a very deliberate word. It says, without warning, the physics of the environment shattered.
Shattered, not slowed down.
Right. It wasn't a gradual slowing down. Cars didn't brake to a halt. Pedestrians didn't stumble to a stop. Everything moving snapped into a rigid stillness mid-stride and mid-rotation.
Just an instant freeze.
And this is where I need to stop and push back on the physics of this a little bit.
Okay.
Because it doesn't make any sense. If a 2-ton vehicle is moving at 20 miles an hour and instantly stops, the kinetic energy has to go somewhere, right?
Oh, absolutely, it has to.
If you just, delete inertia, shouldn't the air heat up to 1,000,000 degrees? Does the ground crack? How is this physically accounted for in the text?
Well, that is precisely the thermodynamic horror of the situation. In our reality, you are absolutely right. The first law of thermodynamics dictates that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed.
Right. Basic high school physics.
Exactly. A sudden stop of that magnitude would convert kinetic energy into massive thermal energy or destructive mechanical force. The passengers would be thrown right through the windshield.
It would be a bloodbath.
It would. But the text explicitly states that inertia is simply, well, it's simply ignored. A wheel stops mid-rotation. A commuter is frozen with one foot hovering in the air.
So the energy is just deleted. like hitting backspace.
Not deleted, overwritten. And this is where the narrative introduces its central mechanism. The text describes the sprawling, multi-layered roar of the city hitting a, quote, hard vertical wall, cutting instantly to zero.
Which is a total acoustic vacuum.
Yeah, and it replaces that noise with a massive low-frequency wave, a frequency that sits so deep in the spectrum it creates that vacuum, erasing all other vibrations.
Wait, hold on. You can't just erase kinetic energy with a sound wave. I mean, if I play a really loud bass note in my car, it doesn't stop the car from moving.
Right, your subwoofer isn't going to stop traffic.
Exactly. So how does an acoustic pressure theoretically override the natural inertia of a falling human body or a moving vehicle?
Well, in our everyday experience, it obviously doesn't. But we need to look at the theoretical application of acoustic levitation.
Okay, acoustic levitation.
Yeah, but scaled up to a godlike extreme. In real-world physics, sound is a mechanical wave. It is a physical vibration traveling through a medium, pushing the molecules of the air.
Like ripples in a pond.
Precisely. In places like Argonne National Laboratory, scientists use acoustic standing waves to levitate droplets of water or, small pharmaceuticals. They do this by crossing sound waves to create pockets of high and low pressure that physically trap matter.
Okay, so they trap a tiny drop of water in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
But trapping a city bus...
Exactly. To scale that up to a bus or an entire city implies an acoustic frequency so impossibly dense, carrying such unfathomable physical force that the air itself becomes structurally rigid.
Oh, wow.
It's no longer a gas you breathe, it's a physical matrix holding every single atom in place.
Okay, let me offer an analogy here. If you're listening to this right now, think about trying to push two identical industrial magnets together. You know that feeling?
Oh yeah, that weird slippery resistance.
Yeah, that invisible, repulsive solidness that you just can't push through. Imagine that feeling, but applied to the very air inside your lungs.
That is deeply claustrophobic.
Right. The physical atmosphere around you suddenly has the density of titanium. Nothing can move forward. Nothing can fall down. It is an artificial, forced stillness imposed by an acoustic anomaly. It's like pausing a video game. But instead of the screen just freezing, the physical air in the room turns to concrete.
And that contrast is so vital to the horror. Organic human motion is chaotic and fluid. This stillness is artificial and absolute. It is a physical law being completely rewritten by a frequency.
Which brings us to probably the most terrifying part of the initial phase, the psychology of sudden isolation.
The narrator's internal experience.
Yeah. You're standing in the middle of this, suddenly the entire world stops, the noise hits a wall. The narrator's immediate internal reaction is to assume internal biological failure.
You're just so telling.
They think, I'm having a sudden stroke, I've gone instantly deaf, my neurology just broke.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that reaction is a brilliant exploration of something psychologists call ontological shock.
Ontological shock. Okay, break that down.
So the human brain is essentially a predictive engine. It constantly builds models of the world to anticipate what happens next. Gravity pulls things down, time moves forward, sound follows action.
It's how we navigate without constantly panicking.
Right. So when the brain encounters a massive predictive error, something that entirely contradicts its foundational model of reality, it panics.
But why assume a stroke? I mean, why wouldn't your first thought be, oh wow, time stopped? Or aliens?
Because for the brain, it is actually far less existentially terrifying to conclude, my personal hardware is failing, I am dying, than it is to accept that the foundational laws of the universe have ceased to exist.
Wait, really? Death is preferable to the universe breaking.
To the subconscious mind, yes. The brain would rather accept its own death than accept the death of reality. It's a psychological defense mechanism.
That is wild. I mean, put yourself in those shoes. If you are sitting in a cafe right now, listening to us, and everyone around you freezes mid-sip.
Just totally paralyzed.
Yeah, the barista is suspended with coffee pouring out of a pitcher, frozen like glass in midair. All sound drops to zero. You aren't going to marvel at the matrix glitching. You're going to grab your chest or claw at your ears, totally convinced your body is betraying you in some horrifying medical emergency.
Exactly. But the text forces the narrator to abandon that comforting delusion really quickly. The diagnosis of internal failure falls apart the moment the narrator actually looks at the crowd.
Because the bodies scattered across the street aren't limp. They aren't unconscious on the ground. The text says they're locked in, quote, impossible, unbalanced posture.
Defying gravity.
Their muscles are rigid and their eyes are wide open and unblinking.
See, if the narrator had simply gone deaf, the people would still be moving. still walking, still talking in silence.
We are.
And if there had been some massive localized biological event like a neurotoxin in the air or a synchronized heart attack, gravity would still apply. Thousands of limp bodies would just collapse to the pavement.
It'd fall over.
Right. The fact that they are locked in unbalanced postures, actively defying gravity, completely removes the safety net of biological failure. The impossible is actually happening before their eyes.
I have to say, though, I found the narrator's tone during this realization almost maddeningly clinical.
Oh, very detached.
Yeah, the narrator says, I took a step forward, my muscles worked, my breath was steady, I was navigating through a sea of human statues. I mean, if I realize I am the only moving object in a city of millions, I am not calmly taking inventory of my breath.
You'd be hyperventilating.
I am losing my absolute mind. Imagine the internal panic of realizing you are completely and fundamentally disconnected from your own species. You're the only one walking freely past a suspended reality.
I think the narrator's clinical detachment might actually be a symptom of that ontological shock we discussed. It's a kind of dissociative state just to process the trauma without shutting down completely.
Like their brain is in safe mode.
Yeah, and the text specifically refers to the narrator as a, quote, single unsynced human being wandering through the gap in the system.
A gap in the system. That language is so specific. It's not, I was the only survivor. It's, I am a dead pixel on a monitor. Or an error code that the operating system just hasn't resolved yet.
It's incredibly dehumanized.
It really frames humanity not as a collection of souls, but as a network.
It is the ultimate solitary witness scenario, to be surrounded by humanity, to be mere inches away from thousands of people, and yet to be entirely alone.
Staring right into their eyes.
Right, you can look into their wide, unblinking eyes, but there is no one home. The architecture of their consciousness has been completely suspended.
Which brings us to the end of the total silence and the introduction of the hive mind. Because the silence doesn't last.
No, it shifts.
A deep underlying frequency, the one that created that massive vacuum, begins to shift. The text describes it compressing and vibrating the air until it forms clear, localized syllables.
Just out of thin air.
Yeah, from everywhere at once, a voice bleeds out into the physical space. 2 words, look forward.
This transition from the abstract acoustic pressure to a structured linguistic command, it fundamentally changes our understanding of the paralysis.
How so?
Well, up until this point, we might assume the people are dead or just trapped in a freeze frame of time. But the text explains that the paralysis is actually a standby mode.
A standby mode. That implies, like, anticipation. It's treating the human biological form like a smart device that has been put to sleep, holding every single motor function in a forced pause until a central instruction arrives.
Precisely. And the execution of that command is terrifyingly violent. Upon receiving the acoustic command to look forward, the standby state ends. Thousands of frozen individuals violently snap their heads forward at the exact same mechanical millisecond.
A mechanical millisecond. I mean, think about human reaction times. If you tell a crowd of real people to turn their heads, it's a wave, right?
It's sloppy.
Yeah, someone processes the command instantly.
Yeah.
Someone else wasn't paying attention and turns a half second later. Someone else turns slowly because their neck hurts. It's organic. But here, there is zero human delay. It is instantaneous, flawless, simultaneous execution.
And the ambient noise of the city rushes back as they move. Engines idle, footsteps resume. But the text notes a critical change.
It sounds wrong.
It notes that the sound is hollow. The chaotic rhythm of independent human action is completely gone. It has been entirely replaced by rigid, synchronized uniformity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We talked about the symphony of the city earlier. Let's revisit that analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are looking at a giant orchestra. Millions of independent musicians all playing their own unique song on their own instruments. It's messy, it's loud, it's beautifully chaotic.
Everyone doing their own thing.
Right. But suddenly, an invisible conductor paralyzes all of them. And when they are allowed to move again, they are forced to play the exact same sheet music. But the music isn't even a song anymore. It's just a single, basic, repetitive, mechanical note.
Just a drone, basically.
Yeah, the text literally calls the citizens identical biological notes, each executing the same central broadcast with total precision.
That evolution from chaotic city noise to structured acoustic commands is the central horror of the piece. It is the transition from freedom to absolute subjugation.
The loss of individual agency.
Exactly. The collective mind has completely suppressed unique human thought. The people are no longer individuals. They have been reduced to a medium. They are hardware through which this frequency operates its software.
And it escalates so quickly. The weaponization of sound goes from paralyzing the city to actively hunting our narrator. The city is now physically synchronized, but then the vocalizations begin.
The acoustic force starts using the people.
Voices across the street, men, women, and children begin to speak. But they aren't shouting in panic or asking for help.
No, the text says they speak in a flat, dead tone. They're simply repeating system instructions. Listen, focus, don't move.
And the narrator describes this phenomenon as acoustic synchronization. Thousands of unique vocal patterns from different vocal cords aligning perfectly into a single destructive geometric audio loop.
Destructive geometric audio loop.
I mean, it sounds incredibly cool, but also physically devastating. If you've ever stood too close to a massive concert speaker, you know that sound is physical.
Oh, absolutely. You feel it in your ribs.
Yeah, it hurts your chest. It vibrates your teeth. Your first instinct, if a sound is hurting you, is to cover your ears. You press your hands over your ears to protect your eardrums. But the narrator specifically notes that covering your ears offers absolutely zero protection.
Because the acoustic pressure being deployed here bypasses the eardrums entirely. The text says it shifts into a physical vibration that wraps directly around your neural pathways.
Okay, but how does that actually work? If I block my ear canal, how is sound getting into my neural pathways?
Well, it relies on the principles of bone conduction and resonant frequencies, but again, pushed to a science fiction extreme.
Right, way beyond normal science.
Sound doesn't just travel through the air into your ear canal, it travels through solid matter. Your skull is actually an excellent conductor of vibration.
Like those bone conduction headphones.
Exactly like that. But more importantly, the nervous system itself operates on electrical impulses, which have their own frequencies. If an external acoustic wave carries a specific, targeted resonant frequency, it can theoretically induce vibrations that mimic or scramble the electrical synapses in the brain.
So it's not just a loud noise that gives you a headache. The sound is acting like a physical virus. It is entering your biological hard drive and actively overwriting the operating system.
Yes, your consciousness is being rewritten by a frequency.
I can't even fathom the terror of that. Realizing that you are losing ownership of your own biology. Your thoughts are being erased by a noise you just cannot escape.
It's a forced formatting of the brain.
And the text emphasizes that you cannot run from it in a traditional sense. The narrator states you aren't running from a predator with a physical shape. You are being hunted by an encroaching, omnipresent noise.
This raises an important question about space. The noise fills every available pocket of space. It pushes the narrator into an ever-shrinking corner.
Because you can't lock a door against a sound wave. You can't hide under a desk. You can't put a wall between you and it because the wall will just vibrate and transmit the frequency right to your bones.
And this highlights a critical point about the loss of human connection within this controlled, silent population. The narrator is surrounded by people, by men, women, and children. But those people are no longer human in any meaningful sense.
They're just empty shells.
Right. They aren't communicating, they are transmitting. The human form has been hijacked to serve as flesh and blood loudspeakers for the anomaly.
It's horrifying.
The ultimate horror here isn't just death, it is the total extinction of the self while the body lives on. You become a tool of forced assimilation.
Which brings us face to face with the actual source of the broadcast. The narrator is finally cornered in an alley. The overlapping voices of the crowd converge directly behind them, condensing into a highly localized point.
The spatial anomaly.
And a clear, singular voice states, "You're the last one."
The network has identified the final missing piece required to close its circuit. The unsynced pixel has finally been found.
And when the narrator turns to face it, what they see completely defies reality. It has no face, it has no limbs, it carries no weapons.
Nothing you can fight.
The text describes it as a vibrating tear in the environment. It's a severe spatial distortion that aggressively bends light and matter around it. The narrator compares it to a software glitch manifesting in physical reality.
I find this conceptualization so fascinating. So many apocalyptic narratives rely on physical antagonists, right?
Yeah, aliens, zombies, rogue robots.
Exactly. A threat with a physical body that can theoretically be destroyed. But the entity here doesn't need physical weapons or appendages because it doesn't exist within the rules of physical reality.
So what does this all mean? How do you fight a glitch? Think about the sheer futility of that. If you are chased by a monster, you can pick up a heavy pipe and swing at its head.
You have a chance, however small.
If you are chased by an attacker, you can run or you can hide. But you can't punch a mathematical error in the universe. You can't stab a spatial distortion.
You cannot fight a flaw in space because the glitch operates on a higher architectural level of reality than you do. Let's unpack the software glitch analogy the text uses.
Please do.
If you are a character inside a video game, you can fight the other characters, but you cannot fight the code of the game itself. If a line of code dictates that the floor is now the ceiling, your character falls.
Because the rules just changed.
The anomaly here treats physical reality as code to be rewritten. It functions like a software glitch in physical reality by treating atoms and sound waves like binary code.
So the spatial anomaly doesn't just break the physical laws of the city, it introduces a new, overriding operating system. And the physical world itself acts as a hostile extension of the entity's will.
Precisely. The environment is the weapon. It doesn't need to carry a gun. It relies entirely on the already assimilated environment, the paralyzed citizens, the manipulated sound waves, the frozen kinetic energy, to corner its prey.
It's an incredibly bleak scenario. I mean, there is no escape hatch here.
No.
And it leads us directly into the climax of this nightmare, the final assimilation and the closing of the loop.
The environment locks down for the final sequence. The ambient noise, the hollow footsteps and idling engines, it all drops back down to absolute zero.
The silence returns. But this time, it is intensely focused. Thousands of heads turn in perfect unison. A massive sea of blank faces stares directly at the narrator.
They are channeling the full weight of the centralized hive mind onto a single coordinate, you, the last unsynced human.
And then, the anomaly delivers its final instruction. It's not broadcast to the crowd this time. It is directed exclusively at the narrator. 2 simple words, say it.
This is the absolute culmination of the neural hijacking.
And the visceral body horror in this specific moment is staggering. The text describes the narrator trying to resist, trying to keep their mouth shut.
Fighting it with everything they have.
But conscious resistance completely fails. The narrator's jaw unhinges, their vocal cords engage entirely against their will, operated remotely by the acoustic pressure driving into their brain.
The illusion of free will is physically shattered. The mind wants to resist, it wants to scream in defiance, but the biology has been compromised.
It's not their body anymore.
No, the body has been remote controlled by the frequency. Audio signals have overridden basic human biological functions.
I really want you, sitting at home or in your car right now, listening to this deep dive, to imagine that specific dread. You are trapped inside your own head. You are mentally screaming, fighting with everything you have to keep your lips sealed.
Total paralysis of will.
But your jaw opens on its own. Your lungs push air over your vocal cords on their own. Your own body is betraying your mind's desperate resistance. It is the ultimate, absolute violation of bodily autonomy.
The climax of the text is the exact moment the word finally leaves the narrator's mouth.
Like yes, or whatever the word of submission is. The moment the sound physically leaves the narrator's throat, the entire city repeats it back.
A perfect, instantaneous echo from thousands of throats.
And that echo isn't just a sound, it is a signal of completion. The text concludes with a chilling finality. It says, the network has closed its loop. The individual self vanishes into the collective, leaving thousands of people to act, think, and speak as a single flawless unit.
A single flawless unit. The transition is complete. It really synthesizes the tragic conclusion of the story beautifully.
It's so devastating.
We often think of alien invasions or cosmic horrors as wanting to destroy humanity, right? But the anomaly's mission wasn't destruction in the traditional kinetic sense. Its mission was perfection.
Perfection.
Yes, it sought to eliminate the chaotic, erratic, messy variables of human individuality. Humans are inefficient. We argue, we bump into each other, we cause friction.
We make noise.
Exactly. The anomaly smoothed all of that out into a flawless, perfectly synchronized system. But the text equating this flawless synchronization with the total death of the individual is profound. Perfection in this context is essentially extinction. The individual self vanishes.
The unsynced pixel is finally fixed, and the screen goes blank. What a heavy, heavy narrative to process. It's the kind of story that lodges in your brain, makes you look at the world around you completely differently the moment you step outside.
It really forces a severe recontextualization of our daily experiences, especially for anyone living in a dense urban environment.
It really does. Because think about our day-to-day lives. How often do we complain about the noise? We complain about the chaos, the lack of synchronization in our daily commutes.
Every single day.
We get profoundly annoyed when the person in front of us walks too slowly on the sidewalk, Or when 100 different conversations make a restaurant too loud to hear our own thoughts.
We just want some peace and quiet.
Right. We wear noise-canceling headphones to block out the world. We are constantly searching for order and quiet.
We view friction as a negative state. But this text reveals that absolute order, a perfectly synchronized reality devoid of all friction, is infinitely more terrifying than the chaos we constantly complain about.
Exactly. When you strip away the chaos, you strip away the humanity. It's a deep dive that really sticks with you, and it frames the mundane annoyances of life as something to be cherished. As we wrap up our analysis of the Midnight Curator's terrifying vision, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that wasn't explicitly in the text, but builds off the sheer horror of this scenario.
A shift in perspective for the listener.
Yeah. Next time you are standing on a crowded, noisy street corner, when you are overwhelmed by the erratic sounds of traffic, the blaring horns, the screeching brakes, and those overlapping, messy, annoying conversations of strangers pressing too close to you, take a second to pause and appreciate the chaos.
Embrace the noise.
Because that messy, unsynchronized friction, the very noise we constantly try to tune out with our headphones, might just be the only proof we have that we are still free and still human.
Beautifully said. It really is the sound of autonomy.
Thank you so much for joining us on this Deep Dives. It's been an absolute trip unpacking the mechanics of this nightmare with you. Keep questioning the noise, keep embracing the chaos, and we will catch you on the next Deep Dive. Take care out there.